Hello everyone and welcome to Tyrant Talks. The point of this is to basically talk about everything dinosaur related, Jurassic Park / world related, or just paleo related in stuff in general. And for this very first episode, when I was thinking what to cover, I thought what better than to basically share with all of you my own little dinosaur journey, as in what made me a dinosaur fan, what made me a Jurassic Park fan, because the two of them are very closely related and kind of depend on each other. Also, another thing that hopefully should become clear by the end of this, if you see my profile picture, you'll see that there's two things in it. One of them is the character of Ben from Camp Cretaceous. The other one is the Jurassic World Dominion Pyroraptor, and they're kind of sharing the profile picture together. Now, the reason why Ben is there, I actually explained in an episode of the Cretaceous Campcast episode, so if you want that story, you can check that one out. In fact, check out that entire podcast, is really good. But today we'll be explaining why Pyroraptor is there, so that's something to look forward to if you're curious about that. But without further ado, let's get this started. The earliest memory I have of dinosaurs and being exposed to dinosaur media happened when I was, let's say, 3 years old. Basically, very young. Back then, my parents gave me a book, my very first dinosaur book, and of course, back then it was basically a means to getting me to shut up, basically. Now, this book, which, if I've remembered, should be on screen right now, you should be seeing a picture of it. You might be able to tell from the quality of the paper and also the dinosaur that is represented on screen. The theropod is meant to be a T-Rex, but it's standing upright and it also has 3 fingers. Based on those two things, you might be able to deduce that this book is old. It is very old. In fact, this book belonged to my mom when she was young, so it's kind of a relic. But of course, I didn't really care back then when I was 3. I opened the book and there were these incredibly evocative images of dinosaurs and all sorts of prehistoric creatures like Dimetrodon or Archaeopteryx or all these sort of wonders. And to 3-year-old me, that was incredible. That was so wonderful and so incredible and awe-inspiring. And yet they were, of course, I now know that they are in fact incredibly outdated and wrong and not at all what those creatures look like, but I didn't care back then. Back then I was blown away by the idea that these strange creatures existed on this planet. They were kind of like dragons, except real. So, and obviously back then I wasn't able to read. Now, sometimes there were parents or any other adult around, and they would basically read me the text and tell me what's going on. But most of the time I was on my own, and not being able to read, I had to come up with a reason as to what's going on in any given picture. For example, I remember there was this one shot of an iguanodon going over a cliff, falling into the seawater, and then being fossilized. Basically, they were explaining how fossilization works. And my little story to explain that was that the iguanodon was chasing a leopard. The leopard dodged the attack, and the iguanodon fell into the water. Now, why would an iguanodon be chasing a leopard? That's not how anything works. I don't know. That was just my 3-year-old mind making things up. But you get the idea. There was this book, and I became obsessed with it, trying to make stories in my own mind to explain what's going on. And thanks to this, I became obsessed with dinosaurs. But by the way, the name of the book is The Age of Dinosaurs, if you don't speak Persian. Ever since that, then I became a massive fan of dinosaurs. I became obsessed with it. The second thing that I remember watching that had dinosaurs in it was the animated Disney movie Fantasia. I'm sure many of you have watched it, but there is a segment, The Rites of Spring, that features dinosaurs and all sorts of prehistoric creatures. And I would watch that particular segment over and over and over again. Never mind the entire rest of the movie, that bit had dinosaurs, that was the one that I cared about. My parents were probably tired of how many times I watched that. And my favorite part was the T-Rex, the carnivorous dinosaur, as I used to call it back then. And as depressing as it may be, my favorite part was the T-Rex killing the Stegosaurus. That was the most awesome thing I'd seen up to that point. So we had a book, we had the Disney's Dinosaur, we had the animated movie Dinosaur, not Disney's Dinosaur. And of course, both of these things, they had some pretty outdated depictions of dinosaurs. I already talked about the book, but the dinosaurs in Fantasia, they weren't exactly the most up-to-date. The T-Rex, I'm pretty sure, is still standing upright. And the Stegosaurus is very old school and Charles R. Knight-esque, that sort of thing. Those were the dinosaurs that I grew up with. I grew up with like super retro dinosaurs. And of course, my dinosaur obsession never went away until at the age of 6, one day my father was like, you like dinosaurs, so there is this movie we can watch together. And that night I saw Jurassic Park for the very first time. I remember the three of us, basically me, my mom, and my dad, we watched it together. They had already seen it, but they were willing to see it again because it's an awesome movie. We all sat together in the couch and we watched Jurassic Park. And by the time we had gotten to the iconic Brachiosaurus scene, the very first time the characters see the Brachiosaurus, I knew that this was going to be something very special. This was going to be one of those moments that I would always remember in my life. Because it was a dinosaur. It was a real dinosaur. Not just because of the effects. Of course, the effects were unlike anything I'd seen before. My previous exposures were an incredibly old book and an animated movie, so seeing this live-action CGI Brachiosaurus was completely brand new territory for me. But it wasn't just that. The movie was showcasing dinosaurs in a way that I had never seen before. They explicitly mentioned the Brachiosaurus does not live in a swamp. You gotta consider, up until that point, every single exposure I'd had to sauropods of any kind, they were always in a swamp. Just because that was how retro dinosaurs work. But this Brachiosaurus didn't live in a swamp. This Brachiosaurus wasn't cold-blooded. And the same was true for all the other dinosaurs. They had clocked the T-Rex at 32 miles an hour. That was insane. The T-Rex did not drag its tail. The T-Rex was standing horizontally, was fast enough to almost catch up with a Jeep. The raptors were, first of all, small, which, given that until that point I thought the very idea of dinosaurs was that they were huge prehistoric creatures, and yet arguably the scariest creatures in the first Jurassic Park movie are small. That's already one hell of a reversal. But the raptors, they had more in common with birds than they did with reptiles. Even the word raptor means bird of prey. So this movie not only showed me, in terms of just quality of the models, the quality of the models, something unlike anything I'd seen before, but in the way that they were being depicted, they were something unlike I'd seen before, and they blew my mind. It really broadened my idea of dinosaurs. Oh my god, dinosaurs were more diverse, more intelligent, more active, just more than what I had seen up to that point. The fact that these dinosaurs weren't like the ones that I had been used to, this didn't turn me off. This made me love dinosaurs even more because they were even cooler. And the film was using these ideas, the ideas of the dinosaur evolution, which up until that point had never been presented on the big screen. You gotta watch every other dinosaur movie that exists before Jurassic Park, King Kong, Valley of Guanji, all this sort of stuff. You'll see very, very retro dinosaurs. That's what the public had been exposed to. And then suddenly, here's this movie bringing revolutionary ideas and using them to make dinosaurs cooler, scarier, and more real. That's the key part. These were real dinosaurs. And that's the magic. That's the wonder. This wasn't an illusion. This was real. I really did feel like I could reach out and touch these dinosaurs. They were real creatures being shown on the screen. And that was awesome. So, one Jurassic Park viewing later, my dinosaur obsession is now even more than what it was before. So, in the span of just 1 week, we watched the entire first trilogy of movies in the Jurassic franchise. We watched The Lost World and we watched Jurassic Park 3. The Lost World in particular showed me that T-Rex, which up until that point had been this sort of ferocious meat eater, was actually a caring parent. And it took care of its child, just like any other parent. And once again, this was a completely new concept to me, but one that made me love T-Rex and by extension all dinosaurs even more. It was another new idea that I hadn't been exposed to, and when I was exposed to it, it broadened my mind. It broadened my idea of how I saw dinosaurs, and once again, that was awesome. And you come to Jurassic Park 3 with the Spinosaurus. Funny thing about the Spinosaurus, before I watched Jurassic Park 3, I knew the only sailed dinosaur that I'd heard of was Ouranosaurus. Somehow I'd heard of Ouranosaurus, but not Spinosaurus. I knew of Dimetrodon, but I also knew that, Dimetro don't call it a dinosaur. Ever since, even as a kid, I was already obsessed with not calling things like Dimetrodon dinosaurs. So the only sailed dinosaurs that I'd heard of was Ouranosaurus. So in my first time watching Jurassic Park 3, until they confirm it on screen that this is in fact a Spinosaurus, I was under the impression that Dr. Grant and the rest of our heroes are just being chased by a very strangely angry Ouranosaurus. I had no idea this was like a carnivorous dinosaur. And oddly enough, many, many years later, the third season of Camp Cretaceous has actual angry Ouranosaurs, which, things come full circle, and it's really cool. Love that scene, by the way. The idea that a herbivore dinosaur is actually doing things, is actually being aggressive. Love that. Because I genuinely hate the gentle giant herbivore trope. I think it's kind of daft and not how herbivores work, but that's getting off topic. So basically, yeah, Jurassic Park 3 showed me this brand new dinosaur that I'd never heard of, Spinosaurus. And not only that, but of course we can't talk about Jurassic Park 3 without mentioning the Jurassic Park 3 raptors, which, yes, looked different than what the raptors had looked like up until that point. The males in particular had quills, but it wasn't just that, it was the eyes as well. I think the eyes of the Jurassic Park 3 raptors are a little bit underappreciated, because I think that's a major thing that makes them effective. That cold, calculating avian stare, that really makes them more terrifying than the reptilian slit eyes, in my opinion. I think birds staring into your soul is just, whoa. But whatever. Jurassic Park 3 raptors, they didn't look like what I'd seen before, but they had these bird-like features, which, for me, tracked perfectly with what the first movie had established. Dinosaurs were more bird-like than reptile-like, raptors in particular, so no wonder that these raptors look more bird-like. And that sort of planted this idea in my head that maybe the birdiness of dinosaurs wasn't limited to things like behavior or just a family tree. Maybe visually dinosaurs could resemble birds, and this was something that I was first exposed to in Jurassic Park 3. But that was at the time of me watching Jurassic Park 3 for the first time, that was the latest Jurassic Park movie. There was nothing else. And I had become so incredibly hungry for dinosaur content that I needed something else, so I started, just hunting for dinosaur books, dinosaur documentaries, just anything dinosaur related I wanted to experience and see. So this is how I got to see Walking with Dinosaurs, which, enough has been said about how great Walking with Dinosaurs was, but that wasn't the only documentary I saw. I saw this other kind of underrated one called When Dinosaurs Roamed America, which, by the way, if you've not heard the Dilophosaurus roar from When Dinosaurs Roamed America, you're missing out. You're missing out on like one of the great dinosaur sound effects of all time. That roar is incredible. But the big one, or two big ones, one of the big ones for me was something called Planet Dinosaur. This was a Discovery Channel documentary, 4 parts, all of them set in the Cretaceous period 80 million years ago. And in particular, the episode White Tip's Journey. That episode in particular has a special place in my heart because that was my very first exposure to a fully feathered velociraptor, or just raptors in general. Again, it was a little odd compared to what I'd seen before, but again, I went back to Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs had more in common with birds than they do with reptiles. So, yes, of course they would be feathered. That's the logical next step. Once again, the idea of dinosaurs in my mind was broadened. Dinosaurs were even more diverse, even more cool or awesome than what I had imagined up until that point. And I did not reject that idea. I fully embraced the idea because I thought the velociraptors with a full coverage of feathers, very eagle-like, very bird-like, I thought that looked amazing. I thought that looked awesome, and it was sort of following on the footsteps of what I'd learned from Jurassic Park. It wasn't the velociraptors, however, that were the most effective dinosaur in that episode, in my opinion, but rather Oviraptor, which may seem like a weird choice, but the Oviraptors in Planet Dinosaur genuinely scared me in a way that not even the Jurassic Park raptors had managed to. During the entire episode, they're presented as these bullies that if they don't like your face, they're gonna break it with their beaks. And they had these deep, very goose-like honking noises. And they genuinely terrified me. And again, it was because of very bird-like features. So very early on, I became accustomed to the idea that birdie dinosaurs or birdie depictions of dinosaurs can be honestly more scary than the reptilian ones, in my opinion, because again, Oviraptors genuinely scared me. It also doesn't help that they spend basically the entire episode just bossing raptors around. Like, every time there's an encounter between oviraptors and velociraptors, the oviraptor just they chase the raptors away. The raptors have no chance against them. So that's how I became basically a fan of feathered dinosaurs. That's what dinosaurs look like. Awesome. The other big documentary that always stayed with me was something called March of the Dinosaurs. Now this is a one episode for sort of like feature-length documentary, and it's basically about following one individual of Edmontosaurus as his herd basically migrates in order to escape the Arctic winter. And this was my first exposure to the idea of dinosaurs living in the snow. Obviously, from Jurassic Park, I'd seen dinosaurs living in the tropics or the jungle. And in the aforementioned White Tip's Journey episode, I'd seen dinosaurs living in the desert. This was dinosaurs living in the snow, which, again, completely blew my mind. I had no idea this was a thing, but again, dinosaurs, they were even more cool, they were even more diverse than anything I had imagined, so awesome. In particular, however, there was this Gorgosaurus that appears sort of like as the predator who at many points threatens our dinosaur protagonists. Of course, these days it would be Nanoxaurus, not Gorgosaurus, so not getting into that. That Gorgosaurus was my first exposure to the idea of a feathered tyrannosaur. I'd seen feathered raptors, I'd seen feathered oviraptors, but a feathered tyrannosaur was something completely new. And it was also love at first sight. I love the Gorgosaurus from Planet Dinosaur, I think from March of the Dinosaurs. I think it looks incredible because of the feathering. And there's one shot in particular that really cemented it in my heart. That was the shot of this very fluffy Yeti-esque T-Rex relative emerging out of the cave and into this snowy, frozen winter wonderland. Again, completely unlike anything that I had seen before, but I completely embraced that. Once again, dinosaurs breaking new barriers, being better, being cooler than what I'd seen up to that point. That was awesome. Following from that, I also started getting into the science side of dinosaurs. How does paleontology work? How do scientists come up with theories or ideas? How does any of this work? I became very obsessed with that. And long story short, we arrive at 2015 and Jurassic franchise is back after after more than a decade being off screen. There's another Jurassic movie. So given just how influential Jurassic Park was in my love of dinosaurs, I was very excited to see this movie. Of course, it had been more than 40 years since the last movie. A lot had happened in those 14 years in the field of science and paleontology, and there had been all these new ideas that I had been exposed to by watching documentaries, reading books, or just doing my own research. The scope of our view of dinosaurs had shifted dramatically. It had changed dramatically. And I was looking forward to, the same franchise that was responsible for initially broadening my mind on dinosaurs to do the same thing again. Except they didn't. They stuck to the past, and not gonna lie, I was kind of disappointed in that. A big part of what appealed about Jurassic to me was the fact that it showed me dinosaurs in ways that I hadn't seen before. Again, it was real, it wasn't an illusion. Jurassic World, with its stubbornness to evolve and to grow, it was kind of an illusion, and that was disappointing for me. It didn't really ring true to what I consider to be the spirit of the franchise. Of course, I cut it some slack just because the very idea of doing another Jurassic movie, like more than a decade after the last one, nostalgia is kind of inherent to that idea. So I was like, okay, you got the audience back, you got the franchise back. Now, can you please, show me some things that that I hadn't seen on the big screen before? Can you please do what the original Jurassic Park did? Unfortunately, they did Fallen Kingdom, which was basically the franchise refusing to let go of the outdated aesthetic. They really were determined to just stick with that. And again, to me, that's not Jurassic Park, because Jurassic Park didn't care about challenging the public perception of dinosaurs. If the first Jurassic Park was afraid of turning people off by showing them something that they hadn't seen before, T-Rex wouldn't be chasing down a jeep. T-Rex would be dragging its tail. Brachiosaurus would be living in a swamp. Dinosaurs would be cold-blooded. The spirit of Jurassic, for me, at least in how I connected with it, was that Jurassic is progressive. Jurassic challenges how dinosaurs are seen by the public. It doesn't just give them what they want. And yet, here they were. Fallen Kingdom gave me a mutant crocodile trying to eat people through lava, basically. And honestly, I couldn't even see dinosaurs on the screen. I just saw generic monsters. Generic monsters that just fight in front of erupting volcanoes, who were always roaring and always trying to kill everything. And I always say, any old movie franchise can give you a movie monster. Only Jurassic can give you a dinosaur. So why not lean into that? And it really felt like the franchise was just refusing to grow up. The franchise that had once given me real dinosaurs was now obsessed with illusions, obsessed with just generic movie monsters. And I didn't really consider Fallen Kingdom to be a dinosaur movie. It was a cheesy B-monster movie. And complete honesty, after Fallen Kingdom, I was like, is this franchise even for me anymore? It's kind of the antithesis of what I want from dinosaur media. It's the antithesis of what appealed to me about the original Jurassic Park. If they just want to give us monsters all the time, then this isn't really for me. Of course, I'm not saying it has no value. That would be stupid. I know a lot of people who genuinely love Fallen Kingdom, and that's awesome. I am 100% sure that some kid watching Fallen Kingdom will be inspired to learn more about dinosaurs and become a paleontologist and just get, they would have a very similar journey to what I had, and all of that is awesome. I'm not trying to deny any of that. I'm not saying, this has no value, or I'm not saying it's wrong to enjoy it. I'm just saying, from my perspective and from what appealed about Jurassic Park to me, Fallen Kingdom is the complete opposite. So, long story short, I had a bit of a falling out with Jurassic after Fallen Kingdom came out. I was all but ready to give up on the franchise. You might be wondering, then, why are you still here? What brought you back? Unironically, one of them was Camp Cretaceous. Because I feel like Camp Cretaceous genuinely depicts dinosaurs as animals, not as monsters. Of course, they still have to use the same models as the Jurassic World movies, but at least those same creatures that act super monstrous in the movies, in the show, they actually act like animals. They don't just blindly try to kill things. You see Toro playing with a little barrel. You see an Ankylosaurus scratching itself. You see Baryonyxes sleeping together. In fact, one of my favorite things about the fourth season, and why I genuinely enjoy it despite all the controversies, is because it's the first installment in all of Jurassic canon to actually show dinosaur fights as a bad thing. Dinosaurs weren't bloodthirsty monsters constantly looking to pick a fight. They're just animals trying to live their lives, and forcing them to fight each other is animal abuse. And the guy who wants to profit off of this is this shouting, raging man-child character. Honestly, say whatever you will about season 4, I love that. That is more close to what appeals about Jurassic to me than any of the movies. I genuinely mean that. I would rather watch season 4 than Fallen Kingdom because, again, the golden rule, animals, not monsters, the golden rule is maintained. So I would genuinely rather watch season 4 than Fallen Kingdom. So Camp Cretaceous kind of brought me back. Battle at Big Rock also brought me back because the Allosaurus in that short acted more animalistic, acted more like a real animal. So I felt like I was watching an actual dinosaur and not just some B-movie monster. So between the two of them, Camp Cretaceous and Battle at Big Rock, they brought me back into the fandom. I was like, okay, let's stick with this and see where they go. And then, some light at the end of the tunnel. Dominion, in my perspective, is starting to course correct a little bit. It's starting to embrace some of the new ideas, whether it's fixing the wrists of the dinosaurs, which, yes, it's a tiny detail, but I still appreciate it. I still love that they do that. And of course, the biggest visual representation of Dominion embracing some of the newer ideas is the inclusion of feathered dinosaurs. And I think the most prominent feathered dinosaur in Dominion is the Pyroraptor. And that is why I think Pyroraptor is special and the best thing to have happened to this franchise in a very long time. It's not the only feathered dinosaur, of course, but a feathered raptor in particular is a much bigger power move because of just how important raptors are to the franchise inherently. A fully feathered winged raptor is one hell of a power move. So I love that. I hope that this is a sign of things that are coming in the future. Of course, I'm not saying it's perfect. Even in the Pyroraptor's case, they still felt the need to basically mess up its face. But I think it's very important course correction. And even in the little prologue that they released for Dominion, I felt like I was actually watching dinosaurs, as in real animals. I think the creatures that you see in the prologue, they act like animals, they act like dinosaurs. That's a really good... That, Battle at Big Rock, and Camp Cretaceous, I think, are good signs for the future. And I really hope this trend continues. Of course, Dominion also has edgy, awesome bro Giganotosaurus who wants to watch the world burn. But I'm trying to not focus on that too much. I'm trying to focus on the more positive vibes that I get. I'm not going to write off Dominion just because of one quote that Colin Trevorrow said in an interview. I think it's only fair to give it a chance. It's only fair to judge a movie or anything really after you've seen it. And so far I do see some positive signs in Dominion that point to the franchise that I love, the franchise that is a big part of why I love dinosaurs and is a big part of what led me to enjoy dinosaurs in a way that I couldn't before. That franchise is finally catching up. The franchise is finally slowly course correcting, and I really hope this is something that continues in the future, because Jurassic is definitely continuing in the future. It's $1 billion franchise. They're not going to stop making movies or content all of a sudden. So that's basically everything that I wanted to cover in this very first episode. I still don't know how many of this I'll make. Depends how much I how much I like the quality of this, how much you guys like this. I'll try to, if I do future episodes, I'll try to make some improvements, but because of the situation that I'm in, I have some pretty darn limited resources, so I can only do my best with, which isn't much, but I'll still try to do slightly better than this. I know this is very unprofessional, very low key, just I really wanted to sort of share this with you. And if you've made it thus far, I would love to know how you guys got into dinosaurs. What do you love about the Jurassic franchise? Whatever it is, I would love to hear it. And with that, until next time, please take care of yourselves.